So I'm here for another episode of Cold Email Breakdown with Josh. And before we get started, I will introduce myself. My name's George. I'm the founder of Email Chaser, which is a cold email sending platform. And Josh, you don't mind introducing yourself as well?
Josh Michaels. I'm the founder of Free Red Boxes, a email agency that specializes in outreach. And we also do email audits and diagnostic tests and pretty much whatever you need email.
So for anyone watching, if you need help with your cold email campaigns, Josh is the guy to reach out to. I'll be putting his LinkedIn in the description of this YouTube video for you to contact him if you want to. Before we started recording today, we were talking about what to do when a lead replies and different strategies. And you were mentioning that you like to usually CC someone into a reply. Do you want to just explain a little bit more about what you were talking about?
Yeah, so in most outreach, when you're talking about multiple mailboxes, right? Because you don't want to send from your primary domain. I have Josh at Three Red Boxes. I don't want to be doing outreach from that because of the risk. So I would set up a alternate domain from Three Red Boxes, get Three Red Boxes, email Three Red Boxes, and I would set up multiple mailboxes depending on the volume I wanted to push out each day, each month. So let's just say you have 10 mailboxes. You can either use your same name, all different variations, or you can use different names, different strategies. But there's a lot of people that think that when they get a reply from somebody, that they want to keep replying from that outreach mailbox. Now, there are positives to it, right? You're creating a really good reputation. A reply is probably the best form of engagement that Google and Office and all of them look for. But you run the risk, because you're doing outreach, of a mailbox being suspended or blocked or restricted or something happening where you end up losing that mailbox. So that's the only place you have that thread with that potential client. You can basically lose it fairly easily if something went wrong. What I generally do is, if somebody replies, if I send George an outreach email and he replies to me, I will generally, my next email will be to loop in the actual salesperson that I want him to talk to. And I will CC them in and say, thank you, George, for your email. I will write something based on what his reply was, so it fits in with it. Not a templated reply, but an actual handwritten reply. And then say, I'm going to loop in Bob, who's the head of sales, who can help you. So that's one way of doing it that I generally do. So that way you still get at least one reply in and one reply back, which shows the mailbox is being used. If you don't want to go down that line, I would at least suggest using a BCC time with your own mailbox or your salesman's mailbox or somebody, so you just don't lose that thread. I've seen it happen. A huge headache. You're 4 or 5 conversations deep in a thread and email with a potential client, and poof, one day it's just literally gone and you have no way of getting it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a high risk if you're using these done for you email setup services where they're setting up these email accounts to resellers, and they also don't give you access to the actual Google Workspace accounts or whatever they're setting up on. So if you don't have physical access to the Google Workspace account, then the risk is probably even higher. So I think those are the kinds of situations definitely where this kind of strategy is important. I mean, in my opinion, if you're doing a really sort of conservative outreach and the Google Workspace accounts that you set up are high quality and they're maybe not even on a reseller, then the risk is pretty low. But most people send campaigns that are higher risk. So, in those situations, this makes sense.
Yeah, the platforms like George was saying, the done for you platforms where you have no access to the workspace or the office tenant. Basically, all you can do is log into the physical mailbox itself, and that's it. Generally, a lot of those platforms will say, if something happens to this mailbox, we will just take it out and swap in a new one. Well, that sounds great, right? They're taking care of, they're paying for, they're doing that if the mailbox goes down, swapping in a new one. But whatever data you had in that mailbox is now gone. So, like George said, if you're controlling it yourself, if you built your own mailboxes, if you have your own workspace, There are ways of getting into the admin and unsuspending mailboxes. There are, or office tenant unrestricted them. But it's no matter what you do, there's a risk. It's just a higher risk with a lot of the done for you mailboxes. And if you're gonna use those, talk to who's ever doing it. See if you can have access to the Google admin, or see if they can at least talk to you before they just get rid of a mailbox. So you could potentially maybe get some data out of it, or at least a copy of an email or something.
Yeah, I just think a lot of people who are new to cold email, they don't understand the details. So they'll look at 100 email counts and they just think that if they set up 100 email counts in this place, for example, that is the exact same as 100 email counts set up in a completely different way. And they're completely, often they're completely different. The details behind the scenes are very different, and things that can go wrong are also very different. So just understanding all the small parts to the situation is important. And sort of on that topic, I'm reading this thing from someone here where they're describing that they set up a bunch of email accounts and then they were pretty much immediately suspended. Do you have any opinions on, you know, what can cause email accounts to get suspended immediately if a person sets them up?
Generally, it's one of three things that I've seen. Number one, the biggest reason that I've seen is you have a really high bounce rate. That's one of the things for Google that really makes them angry and will suspend a mailbox fast. So if you start having 4, 5, 6, 10% bounce rates, in a day, day over day, they will just shut the mailbox down. So number one, any list that you send to, especially in outreach, make sure you do hygiene. There's plenty of good providers out there. Make sure you run hygiene on all of them. Get rid of the unvalids, because that's the fastest way to have bounces. Anybody that you're buying lists from, and I don't mean to be mean to any of them, if you don't clean a list from any of these providers, you're going to have bounces. They can't stay up to date day over day. People leave jobs every single day. They have these huge databases with millions and millions and millions of users. People leave jobs every day, every week. Mailboxes are shut down. Mailboxes are full. There's a lot of things that happen. So make sure you hygiene it. That should get you well under the 2 or 3% threshold that you need to be. Bounces is usually number one. If you hit a really high spam complaint rate, all of a sudden, there's the potential for a suspension. Generally, they don't suspend because of that, but I have seen it happen a couple of times. And the third one is if you're connected to some kind of platform, usually warming, that isn't connected, isn't sending the right way, right? They're not using OAuth signatures, that they're not doing it correctly. They're sending random patterns to mailboxes that are not high quality. The way they're sending them is not good. This can also happen on certain sending platforms. Last year in June, July, Microsoft Office decided to restrict mailboxes. They found a way to detect an anomalous sending pattern, what they call it. So a lot of the outreach platforms that you sync your mailbox to, and the warming platforms, if you have that separate, they were trying to detect that. And if they thought that's what you were doing, they just restricted the mailbox across the board. I saw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mailbox get restricted basically overnight. So that's another way it can get suspended or restricted, is if they feel like there are warming platforms out there, there are sending platforms out there that are not the highest of quality. We don't always know what they're doing, and the way they connect and the way they send could give bad data back to Google or Office saying you're doing something wrong. This is outreach. You're trying to game the system in some way.
You mentioned Microsoft as well, which I think is relevant because Microsoft, in my experience, is a lot more, I don't know how to describe it, but they usually cause a lot more issues on brand new email accounts compared to Google Workspace. So if you have a brand new Microsoft 365 tenant and you set up some new email accounts there, if you try to send immediately, you're going to run into a lot of issues often. You might face automatic bounces if you connect your email accounts to this automated sending platform, because even though you are on a paid Microsoft 365 account, they still have you on a trial tenant. So until you leave the trial tenant, you're going to have these automatic bounces, which you can contact their support to take you off. But sometimes even when you do that, you still have to wait 14 to 30 days. So it's kind of a bit of an issue with Microsoft usually. Not saying you can't use Microsoft, but it's I've had way more problems compared to Google.
There's definitely a wait period for Google or Office. If you're setting up a brand new workspace or a brand new tenant, you're going to run into some volume issues where you just can't sit. I've noticed it. Some people say they have, some people say they haven't. A brand new Google workspace seems to be restricted to volume heavily for 60 to 90 days. Part of that is how many mailboxes you put on there. There's some algorithm that they have that, I mean, I've seen them restrict you. You can't send out more than 20, 25 a day for 2 months. And that includes your live emails, that includes your warming emails, that includes everything. So there's fairly limited disabled. They will stop you and restrict you and bounce emails very, very fast. And as George said, Office, I can generally, if I set up a brand new tenant, I'm sitting on it for probably 30 days before I even start warming on it or warming it up, setting live any. Right. So it sometimes you want to build it into the workspace or tenant you already have built if it has 8 years behind it and you don't want to have to start a new tenant or workspace. I know there's a belief that if I already have my business workspace, if Email Chaser has their Google business workspace and they decide to spin up outreach for themselves, that they don't want to put the outreach domains under the same workspace because Google could figure out, tag it back to other domains. I personally don't believe that that's true because you could have multiple businesses, multiple websites under one Google workspace. But I know people that have that fear. So if you're going to set up a new workspace or a new tenant, be patient, take your time. If I set up a new mailbox, I'm literally not even sending a single email. I wait 24 hours to even send a test email, just to play it safe. And I won't set up warming on them for probably at least on Google 2 weeks, on Office probably 30 days before I even start using these mailboxes at all because they are really restricted.
Have you noticed any decreases in reply rates during the summer months? So, obviously now we're in summer, it's July. A lot of people are not working, they're on vacation. Have you seen any decreases?
Yeah, we definitely went through a period the end of June, early July, around July 4th, where most of my clients were getting a much higher out of office reply rate than normal. It went from one a week, kind of thing. So all of a sudden we were running a 4% for one client, a 9% out of office reply rate for another client. So it is somewhat industry specific, but it did seem to be a higher number across the board of getting out of office replies. And I've always been curious how many people actually set out of office versus how many people go out of office. Does everybody actually put that auto reply on there, or do some people just go on vacation? Right. So if I have a 10% out of office reply rate, is it really 20%? Because there's another 10% that just didn't set it. But overall, that the reply rates dropped. They seem to be coming back up now. But I would say there was definitely a hard 2, maybe 3 week period, end of June through about this week, where reply rates just dropped across the board. A lot of out of office replies and just not even negative or positive replies, just sometimes nothing. Clients that were getting 2%, 3%, 6% reply rates dropped in half, if not less.
Yeah, I was reading this thing where someone was talking about a sudden decrease in reply rates, and I think it's common for people to want to panic and jump to conclusions, but often you just have to keep doing what you're doing, and with time it bounces back. It's just there's seasonality to everything. Yeah, sometimes there's seasonality to SEO, to cold email, and it's often things not even related to what you're doing, but it's these sort of external factors.
Yeah, it definitely happens too, depending on your industry, from like Thanksgiving through Christmas. You got to start to be really careful and maybe scale back your volume. Just a conversation that I have a lot is, if somebody's on vacation, whether out of office reply is sent or not, are they ever really going to read that email? Because it's going to get buried under all of the other emails that they got while they were on vacation for. So imagine how many emails you would have in your mailbox if you didn't check it for 7 days or 14 days. There'd be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and they're coming back into work after vacation. They probably have a lot of things on their mind. That's the last time you want to have your outreach email buried somewhere in there, because they're probably just going to ignore it. They have too many other things to do, right? Yes, it's there. Yes, the potential of them seeing it is there because they're going to scan through all their emails, but they're probably just looking for the important, right? And it's a better chance of getting lost. So it's one of those, to send it anyways and take the chance, or do we just scale back a little bit and maybe not waste some of these leads during certain times of the year? I would say end of June through mid-July, and I would say from mid-November almost through January 1st, I would highly consider scaling back. Not stopping, like George said, don't just stop, but think about who you're sending to. Think about your industry. If you're sending to schools, they're on break. They're not there. Depending on who you're sending to, they may not be in office, or they might be taking vacation, or they might be, or whatever it is, and just use that as a consideration. I like to scale back around those times, about 50% volume, whatever we're doing for, and then after the first, start to scale.
I mean, ideally, whatever kind of user acquisition or customer acquisition strategy you implement, whether it's cold email or SEO or whatever, you do it in a way where it can bring in new customers or new users sort of on an ongoing basis. So sometimes when I hear people panicking about sudden decreases in reply rates, maybe due to seasonality in their industry, I always think to myself, why are they so concerned about this sudden decrease? Because you zoom out and then you think about it over the course of years and not just the next 3 weeks. It doesn't actually matter, but a lot of people are very focused on the immediate future as opposed to the sort of longer term strategy. So, for example, if you're setting up a cold email campaign or campaigns, does it really matter if your response rate decreases by 50% for a month during summer? I mean, probably not. I mean, if your entire business is dependent on that one campaign's results, then you probably have a different issue in your business.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I know we talked about before. One, most good platforms, if you get an out of office reply, will re-queue up that email to go out in X amount of days, right? Each platform's a little bit different. Some is 7, some are 10, some are 14. But keep in mind that email will go back into the hopper, will go back into the queue, and will go on, right? So you're not just losing that lead completely. So that's number one. And number two, like we said before, if you're getting out of office replies, that means your inbox. So if you all of a sudden go through a 2-week period, like I did with a couple clients, where our out of office is shot up 10%, and you're sitting there going, I'm not getting any replies. I think we're going to spam. Something's wrong with the infrastructure. If you're getting all of a sudden that 4, 5, 6, 8% out of office reply rate, which is higher than your normal reply rate, you're not going to spam. It can't trigger out of office if it's in the spam folder or junk folder. So it's actually a good sign at the end of the day. And like I said, it'll just get re-queued up in 7 days or 14 days, and you'll hit that person again. You don't just lose them. But I said earlier, I don't like to be in the middle of 200 emails of somebody walking back in from vacation. So it's something to keep in mind, what you're doing, what your industry is, who you're emailing, and just know your seasons. Know when it works better. Maybe, like George said, keep your stats, keep all campaigns that you ran with dates and when they ran, and start to look at, oh my God, in March through April, we killed it. And if you know that, maybe plan to scale up during that time. Plan for it and know what you can do. And then if in July it drops, maybe you scale back a little bit.
One more thing I want to mention, someone was telling me that they like to add links to the signatures, specifically a LinkedIn and YouTube link, because they were tracking some data and they're basically showing that a high percentage of people were clicking on those links from their cold emails. And their whole idea was, once people got to their LinkedIn profile or their YouTube channel, their credibility increased dramatically. And as a result, people were more likely to reply. So would you have any opinions on this whole idea of best practices for deliverability versus what actually gets the most replies? Because some people say only send plain text emails, but even if adding some links might be worse from a deliverability perspective if those links, for example, potentially increase your reply rate. Yeah, it might make sense. Do you have any opinions there?
Number one, in a perfect world, I would not have links, especially in my first outreach email. Perfect. But like George said, I've worked with plenty of people who they want to put their LinkedIn link, they want to put a link back to their website, they want to put a link to something, YouTube, whatever it is, like they said, to show social proof, to show their branding, to show who they are. I asked one very simple question. Do you think that helps you get conversions? Now, there's never going to be analytical proof of that. You can't say, oh, this person clicked my YouTube link, which made them reply to me. There's no way to have factual data proof that that is what happened. But if you talk to these leads that come in the door, right? When you get to those appointments or demos that you're meeting with them, have that conversation. Ask them if you have that YouTube link in your signature. Ask them if they checked out your YouTube channel or your LinkedIn page. Ask them if they did it. If you can start to prove that, yes, branding of some kind, social proof of some kind helps you, by all means, figure out a way to do it. It is harder to keep up your deliverability over time. One, if you have the same link in all of your signatures and you change up the content from one campaign to another campaign to another campaign, but every one of them says Josh Michaels, founder of 3 Red Boxes, and a link to my LinkedIn, now you have something that ties all of them together. So if one campaign started to get some spam complaints, they're going to record anything that's the same from that campaign content to the next one. So if that, and especially links are the easiest thing to track. So if I have my LinkedIn profile underneath it as a link and I run a bad campaign for whatever reason, bad targets, bad content, you start to get spam, and then we swap everything out, but I keep that same signature with that same link, you're running the risk of it being tied together. So it is tricky. I stripped everything out of that email that I don't believe needs to be there to get me the conversion that I want. Again, if you have some kind of proof in your head that it helps you get conversions, we could try to figure out how to best do it. And I get it. People want to be brand, right? If people have either heard of them or they want to show that they have larger YouTube followings or LinkedIn followings or Instagram followings, show who they are and what they do. I totally get it. But is there a better way to go about it is the question. Is there a more creative way to show that to people without having to put a link in it?
Yeah, I think it really just sort of summarizes this whole thing for anyone watching who might be new to cold email. It's just all that experimentation. Too many people come into this and they just want to, launch 1 or 2 campaigns. If those fail, then that's it, and they just give up. But maybe you have to launch 20 campaigns over the course of multiple months before you find something that really works, and then you scale that. I mean, if you went into any other customer or user acquisition strategy, SEO, paid traffic, whatever it is, and you said, oh, I just want to press a couple buttons and immediately transform the sort of lead generation for my company, people would obviously just laugh at you and think you're delusional. But for some reason, in the cold email space, people seem to have that mindset where all you have to do is click a few buttons and you just magically have customers lining up to buy your product or service. And that's just not how it works. So definitely experiment and also be creative, because sometimes the best performing campaigns are things that the average person is not going to think about. And for anyone who is watching this who has a business and you want to implement cold email for your company, but maybe you don't have time to learn all this stuff and implement it, well, Josh is definitely the guy to reach out to. So I'm going to link to his LinkedIn profile in the description of this YouTube video. And before we wrap up, do you just want to mention to everyone how they can get in contact with you?
Yeah, you can go to my website, 3redboxes.com. We have a form there you can fill. You can get in direct contact with me. Or if you go to my LinkedIn page, it does have my contact information on there. You can send me a direct message. You can email me, whichever way is easier for you. But you can get in direct contact with me and we can talk about your needs. Have a free 20-30 minute consultation. If you have questions about how to move forward with it and you just want someone to bounce ideas off of, I'm here. Happy to help.
I will. Thanks for joining me on this week's episode. I'll see you next week. And thanks also for everyone watching.